All right, we'll go ahead and call the December 14th meeting of the Murfreesboro City Council to order. We're at the Airport Business Center. If you will, if you'll bow with me for our pledge and our prayer. Chance that we get to come together. It's a special time of the year that we can be thankful for this past year, that we can, Lord, we can celebrate our triumphs, and we can look to see where we've learned, where we fell short. Lord, that you help us be able to understand why you've placed us, where you've placed us, and how you've placed us. Lord, that you open our eyes and you open our mind to be able to make the decisions that are fitting to you. During this time, we know that there's been loss. There's been family members that have lost. So I pray that you will be with those that are experiencing sadness, that you'll be with them to give them comfort, and most of all, that you'll be with them to give them strength. Lord, we thank you and we love you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Jennifer, I think you have an announcement, or not an announcement, but an introduction that you'd like to make.
I do. We finally have our new city clerk, Chris Yeager, with us. So I wanted to formally introduce him to everyone. He's come to us from California and has a lot of experience that he's bringing from his work out there. So we're very, very happy to have him here filling the position that Joshua filled previously.
Hey, Chris, I don't know if Jennifer's told you, but the last city clerk grew a man bun. So if you start in January, if you're like me, maybe by the year 2027. But anyway, we're glad you're here, bro. All right, we'll move into old business. You have ordinance 22046, fiscal year 23 budget amendment ordinance. This is second and final reading.
Y'all had one change to consider before approval on second reading. Airport grant revenues and land expenses are increasing to reflect a property purchase that was approved at the October 20th meeting. So I recommend approving this change and then approving the budget amendment on second reading.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Ms. Saberwater? Aye. Ms. Gills Harris?
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell? Aye. Vice Mayor Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. All right, we'll move into action items. Ordinance 22OZ41, rezoning property along Veterans Parkway.
We need to vote on the ordinance now that we voted on the amendment.
Like I said, we need to reconsider ordinance 2204. Fiscal year budget ordinance as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Please call the roll.
Ms. Saberwater? Aye. Ms. Gills Harris?
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. Now we'll move to ordinance 22OZ41, rezoning property along Veterans Parkway. This is second and final reading.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Please call the roll.
Ms. Saberwater? Aye. Ms. Gills Harris? Aye. Mr. Maxwell?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
All right, we'll move to ordinance 22OZ40, zoning property along Burnt Knob Road. This is second and final reading.
So moved.
Second. Motion and second. Please call the roll.
Ms. Saberwater? Aye. Ms. Gills Harris?
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Ordinance 22OZ36, rezoning property along Haynes Drive. Second and final reading.
So moved. Second.
Motion and second. Please call the roll.
Ms. Saberwater? Aye. Ms. Gills Harris?
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Item 5 has been removed. Item 6, Planning Commission recommendations. Mr. Blomley.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, or good morning, Mr. Mayor, I should say. I'm used to saying good evening. Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of council. We have 2 public hearings to schedule, both recommended for approval by the Planning Commission, and we recommend a date of January the 19th for those 2 public hearings. Be happy to answer any questions.
If there are none, I move for approval.
Motion and second, please call the roll.
Ms. Averwater? Aye. Ms. Gels Harris? Aye. Mr. Maxwell?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. Thank you, Mr. Bowling. All right, we have a learning management system agreement.
Good morning, Mayor and council members. Thank you for the opportunity to present this morning. After a thorough RFCSP process, staff recommends using Cornerstone for online management, leadership, and safety training modules for employees through its learning management system, better known as LMS. The LMS system is a software application and web-based system equipped with over 2,800 management, leadership, and safety training courses for our employees to engage with online. It will allow the city to train and develop employees to be effective current and future leaders. In addition, the system will allow the city to register, track, and monitor training activity. The expense of the program is $45,000 for the first year and $60,000 for year two. The total expense for the two-year contract is $105,000. The amount of the first year is $5,000 below the anticipated cost of this service. The additional cost in year two will be supplemented by the department's FY 22-24 operating budget. As I conclude, I'm available for any questions that you have, asking for your approval for this system.
Do we already have an LMS?
No, we do not.
Okay. So this will basically aid in employee development.
It is an employee development training program where, as I was saying earlier, employees can go online at any time of the day and take a course virtually. We have 2,800 courses in this system.
Okay. No other questions?
I have a couple of questions. How will this system integrate with our current system that we already have in place?
Great question. So it will integrate with our Munis system. One of the things we did on the front end, we wanted to make sure they will integrate going forward, whatever system we have. So I worked with our IT team. They were part of the evaluation process to ensure that it will integrate with our system.
Okay. So how is this going to be used to actually develop future leaders?
Another good question. When you look at what the long-term plan is this is going to integrate with our succession planning process as we look to the future. Because currently today we have about 17% of our current leaders that could retire within the next 3 to 5 years. This system will allow us to begin to develop, to train current leaders and future leaders so they are prepared when someone leaves, they have the skills and knowledge to do what they need to do going forward. Because right now we're kind of exposed, to be quite honest with you.
Okay, is the price of this program, is it based on the number of employees, or how was the price established?
Yes, yeah. We negotiated where our employees are included, both full-time and part-time employees.
Now, I keep hearing the word future leaders. What about if I'm not a leader and I'm looking for a promotion? How would this program help me? I mean, we putting a lot of emphasis on leaders, and, as we know, out of 900, almost 1,000, everybody can't be a leader.
Right.
So me being an employee with no desires to be a leader, but I have a desire to keep moving up, being promoted, how does this program help me?
Well, this system will give you the skills, train you on some of the abilities that you may need to improve your communication skills, your leadership skills, regardless of where you are in the city, regardless of the position. If you have a desire to improve your competencies, then this system will be available for you to do that. Both leaders and non-leaders. So anyone in the city can use it. That's the design of it.
But I'm applying for a position, and Austin is applying for the position also. He has on his application where he has gone through this program. I have not gone through any of the modules. Would Austin have an advantage over me?
He could. He very well could. Whoever the hiring manager is, he or she may look at that experience, those credentials, and say, hey, this person has more experience, may be better equipped for this role. It could help that individual.
And it could hurt me, maybe.
But it would influence and hopefully motivate you to start taking some of these classes.
Will we consider, when we have an opening, and when you put the criteria for the position, will you all in the future, this is what I'm asking, in the future, would you all put on the application a candidate is highly being considered? That's what companies are beginning to do. If they know, like Shane and I are applying for the job, we already know Shane's going to get it. Because, I mean, so instead of making me go through all the stress and everything of trying to interview and help get people to help me interview, if we can just put a line on there, a candidate is being highly considered. We're not saying this person's going to get the job. That may deter me or may even make me still want to apply. That's what these major companies are doing now. They'll put a line, they're putting lines now. We have a candidate that we are highly considering. We're not saying, and then I could come and blow Shane out of the water with my interview. But at least let me know that you're considering somebody.
Well, I have seen that. I have seen that on some job postings with other organizations. We have not done that yet, but that is a possibility. One of the things that a lot of companies look at when they're trying to hire individuals, they'll look at the job description.
Right.
You know, do that person fit the job description? Do they have the skills, the experience, the credentials we're looking for in this particular role? What you're asking is, will we eventually at some point in the future where we have a candidate in-house that we're looking at, do we put that on the application? I think that's something that, I have to get with the city manager and other leaders and say, hey, do we want to do that? Do we have a strong candidate internally that we want to look at? I mean, that's a possibility.
Yeah, I would like to see that. It may not be through my term, but eventually, so it's very stressful interviewing for a position. And so if I kind of know you're at least considering somebody, like I say, I may go and blow Shane out of the water with my interview, and you won't be considering him anymore. But, let's just look at that in the future. And I have no more questions.
All right, thank you.
Is this job-specific kind of training, or what?
Not necessarily. No, it's not job specific. It's really again what I said earlier. It has over 2,800 training modules in it, from leadership to management to safety to communication. You name it, it's somewhere within this module and within this platform. It will, regardless whether you work in planning, you're in finance, you're in HR, whatever the category, it has training modules in there, or courses, to help improve your skill set. So regardless of the position that someone has, it's just going to give them or improve their skills so they can be a better employee for the city.
So the incentive is basically individual, or is there some kind of incentive that we're providing?
It's a great question, too. It could be where, say, we see a candidate or individual who has the potential to move up to another position. That leader may put together what we call an IDP, an individual development plan, where we're training that individual, preparing them for the future, saying, hey, I need you to complete these type of courses so when the next position come open, you have the skills ready for it. Then the flip side of that is, internally, from an intrinsic standpoint, an individual may have the desire to say, I want to get better. I want to improve my ability to move up, and that may be self-motivated by them to do this.
These are all self-paced instructions?
Yes. Self-paced.
It seems to me that maybe, I don't know what the recognition would be, but it seems like at some point, if there's somebody, using this on a regular basis, would give them some kind of recognition. I would think that would be something to consider.
It's funny you say that, because within this system, this is one of 9 systems we looked at, and this one had what we call a gamification system, where it allows you to compete with others on the amount of training that you have completed over say, a year's time.
Yeah.
So that can be an incentive to motivate you to get more and more training.
I think it's a step in the right direction. I've used systems like this when I read learning and development. It's good because you can have a discussion with a subordinate
Right.
and come to an agreement on, here's a couple of things you can undertake, self-paced, and then we'll meet back again in 3 to 6 months and review your progress. So I think it's a good tool to help develop employees and keep our best employees. So if there's no further questions, I'll second, or I'll make a motion that we approve this.
Second.
Motion second. Any other discussion?
Ms. Saberwater? Aye. Ms. Gels Harris?
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Shacklet? Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Thank you.
Randolph. All right, we're going to go into public infrastructure project updates.
Thank you, Mayor. We've, Lexi, pull the presentation up here. Start off thanking her work on this, and Joe Ellison, they've done all the heavy lifting on putting this together. We've got about 20-some-odd, 25, 26 projects to go through kind of quickly.
Top 26.
Top 26, yeah. But of course, we'll be glad to answer any questions along the way, if any come up, of any project specific. I'd also like to add that this presentation will go on our website and will be updated quarterly, so it'd be a little bit more accessible for the council and for the public to be able to have access to, just to kind of get an update on where we are with things. With that, Jim's going to go over the state-led projects, and then I'll hit the local projects after he's finished.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Appreciate the opportunity. Like Chris said, I'll be going over the state-led projects as well as the locally managed projects utilizing federal funding. And just so you know, we reached out last week, and these are current updates from the Region 3 Project Development Manager with TDOT. So we can start out with Salem Highway Phase 2. We're estimating the construction completion date of spring of 2024. It was originally set at 23, but due to material, issues with getting materials and things of that nature in, it'll probably be delayed. The next project is New Salem Highway Phase 3 widening. This particular project, it's scheduled, at this point, it is in the current TDOT 3-year plan, and it's scheduled for FY24, which means the earliest construction letting date of that would be December of 2023. They're on the federal calendar year based on their projects due to the federal funding. See that thing up here. Next project is Thompson Lane. This project is currently in the right-of-way phase. I think there was over 150 right-of-way acquisitions needed for this particular project. The construction funding has not been identified in the current 3-year plan. Does not mean that it may not be added in the next year or two. Old Fort Parkway resurfacing. You guys are familiar with this project. You approved a contract. This will be converting a 5-lane cross-section to a 7-lane cross-section from the interstate out to Brinkley Road. The anticipated construction start will be 2023. We're thinking that the letting will be March of 2023. That's the schedule. That's the current schedule. Okay, this is the Old Fort Parkway widening. You guys approved this tier recently. We will be moving forward with TDOT. negotiating moving this project forward once our tier is developed and the planning document has been developed. Staff will be bringing to you, probably the first of the year, another tier report for the Memorial Boulevard project. This will be from Thompson Lane to Jefferson Pike. We have also been in discussion with TDOT with this particular project, and we will be working on that study to start the initial phase of this project. And as you are aware, we have also approved a tier contract for Lascassas Highway from Clark Boulevard to Compton Road. This project is being studied now, and we will be working with TDOT on a project initiation plan. Bradeville Pike, we are currently in the right-of-way acquisition phase. David, we're getting close. We're, I think, down to about 15 out of 150-plus parcels. We're anticipating construction late summer, early fall of 2023. Cherry Lane Phase 3, we are in the right-of-way acquisition phase. Working that diligently. We're anticipating construction winter of 2024. Also wanted to identify the Rutherford Boulevard Adaptive Signal System. We have submitted our final drawings to TDOT, and we're actually waiting on a notice to proceed to construction from TDOT, and we're anticipating the letting spring of 2023. We have recently initiated a signal project on Memorial Boulevard to improve the technology along that corridor. It is operating off Windows 7 and a 1990 platform of signal equipment. So it's in dire needs of getting upgraded. The new upgrade will provide us with a lot more technology, a lot more information on helping to develop better and more consistent timing platforms. Estimated for that was spring of 2024. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Griffith to go through the locally funded projects.
Thank you, Jim. Just a reminder, most state projects are about 5 to 10 years in duration from whenever they're initiated to completion. Most of our local projects are about 3 to 5 years once they're initiated. This is the Asbury Lane realignment that you recently, I guess back in the late summer, approved the design and right-of-way acquisition for this. This is where we take Asbury Lane over to Conference Center Boulevard and bring Wilkinson over as well, and we'll form a new intersection there to relieve some of the problems we're having there on Medical Center Parkway and Asbury Lane. This is the BZ Road River Rock Connector. This project bid last week, and we actually received really good bids back on that. It came in within our budget for it, so we'll be starting construction after the first of the year. This is the Brinkley Road project, phase 1, which is currently under construction. That project's currently on schedule to be completed in July of this year. We flipped traffic to the north side, and we're currently working on the south side of the bridge. The Butler Butler Drive realignment is underway. This has been completed in conjunction with the Elam Road realignment with the Buc-ee's that's going in there at the corner. Both of those roads will be realigned away from the interchange there on I-24 to allow signalization, and also have a lighting project at that intersection that we're currently underway with TDOT as well. Cherry Lane Phase 2, this will actually connect with a project that Jim mentioned, Cherry Lane Phase 3. We're still working out some environmental permitting issues with this. The Corps of Engineers asked for some more information, and we're looking at some different options there. Gateway Boulevard projects moving along well. It's construct a new 3-lane road section over to Robert Rose Drive. We're currently in the right-of-way acquisition phase of that, and we should bid that job shortly after the first of the year. Loud Street Phase 3 is in conjunction with the development there of the church property that we sold, and that is scheduled to start construction in the winter of 2023. Of course, that'll be dependent on how the development's moving forward of that property. McKnight Park Access Road. It's a project that you approved the design for just within the last month or so. It's a pretty straightforward project that we're anxious to get started. It will should start construction in the early part of 2023. The next three projects are the Medical Center Parkway projects, Phase 1. Of course, this will go from, pull it up. This will go from I-24 to Thompson Lane. That the survey's completed for that. We pretty much got a preliminary alignment set through there, just working out some of the details and drainage. We hope to, we'd like to say construction's already started on it with the Clary Park work, as they're building a really long section of that, adding the third lane on the, I guess that's the northwestbound section of it across from the avenues. But our section should start last of first quarter or possibly the first or second quarter of this year. Phase 2 will go from Thompson Lane, click on it too. We'll go from Thompson Lane over to the fountains there with where the new amphitheater is planned. That is scheduled to start completion by the end of 2023. We are looking at possibly accelerating some of the work right in front of the amphitheater there, just to kind of coordinate all the construction that they're doing as part of their traffic impact study. And then finally, Phase 3, we'll pull it up there to the fountains, and it will actually go all the way to Broad Street. The majority of the work on this will actually be at the intersection of Northwest Broad Street. That was really, if you'll remember, that was our only failing intersection along this route in the latest capacity study that was completed a few months ago. It's primarily that the left turn coming off Broad Street heading westbound on Medical Center Parkway. So we're expecting double lefts on that movement, and then we'll have probably double rights, the reciprocal movement heading eastbound Medical Center Parkway to Broad Street. We expect that project to to start. We think there's a couple of businesses that have to get purchased in order to complete that work. Working through the right-of-way, expected to start the early or spring of 2024. The often talked about Rucker Lane project is scheduled Phase 2. We hope to bid that after the first of the year. A lot of it's being held up with negotiations with Colonial Pipeline. If you right where my cursor's at, where they cross close to the entrance to Muirwood. We think we've got a solution worked out with them. And if we do, we'll move forward with the construction, like I said, shortly after the first of the year, or at least bidding that project. That phase will actually take you from the entrance to Muirwood all the way to State Route 96. Rutherford Boulevard project. This is the section that'll connect from Warrior Drive over to Rutherford Boulevard. It'll be a new bridge over the interstate. We've started survey and design of this, working through some of the environmental questions. If you'll remember, there's a little pond right here that we have to go through in order to connect up to Rutledge, and we're working through that. Matter of fact, we're submitting for a field review with the Corps of Engineers this week, and that project is expected to start in the winter of 2024. Project we just recently started completed the survey and started the design is the intersection there at Rutherford Boulevard and Broad Street. That'll essentially convert Broad Street to a 5-lane section between Kensington and Elam Road, and then it'll also offer some improvements to Rutherford Boulevard as well. That project's estimated start date is for construction is 2025. Last but not least, St. Andrews Drive, we recently completed the survey for that and working on some alignment options, especially with our new school that we've got here, the Salem Elementary School there to the south and east. We're looking at improving it'll be a 3-lane section, but we're also looking at improving our pedestrian connectivity there. We've got a lot of kids walking to school or want to walk to school, and so we're looking at a multi-use path there. And also some possible traffic calming to help keep the traffic a little slower for folks wanting to use the pedestrian features. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Again, I remind you that this will go live sometime before the end of the year, so, and will be updated quarterly so we can keep the public up to date on how the progress is going.
Chris, do you have access to look at other areas on the, can you go out to Burnt Knob, Burnt Knob and Blackman?
You're gonna test me, huh? Probably test me, probably fail miserably. You might have a better shot at finding it.
You're almost there.
Go.
Blackman United Methodist Church.
There. Go ahead, get it.
No, you're right there.
Right on it. You did it.
Yeah, that's it right there.
That's it? I find it?
Yeah.
I just doubted myself. I live out there.
So Chris, find your way home.
Help me me home.
Ladies and gentlemen, Chief Engineer.
The only reason I ask this, so if you continue going west down Blackman,
So here's Burnt Knob, Blackman Roads up through here.
yeah, so just go back up Blackman, back to where the county's looking at another school site. The way.
Beatty Farm, Chris.
Beatty Farm?
Baker and Black. There you go. There you go.
Yeah, so the reason I'm asking that is because Shelton is I guess to the east, yeah, right there.
Right up here.
And we don't have anything on our infrastructure for Blackman and then the interchange at Burnt Knob. Has there been discussions with the county on the infrastructure in that area? The only reason I ask is I would assume that all of that traffic where the high school's got to come back down Blackman, a 2-lane road with no curb, no gutters, no sidewalks. Do we have anything planned for that area?
We do not. We really, the closest thing that we have is back down at the intersection there at Burnt Knob and Blackman, and we're going to kind of blow up that intersection to help. But that was really started planned with Shelton Farms, so something we need to look at, because this is actually I used to live not too far from that intersection. It's a narrow 2-lane road. The county did a little bit of work on Blackman a few years ago, trying to put some shoulders on it, but it's not really anything to speak of. But that's certainly something we can.
Yeah, my thought is that before that project gets too far along, going to Smyrna, most of those students are going to be going to Stewart's Creek. We just need to have some kind of conversation with the school board and or I guess it'd be their engineers, that as they're considering that site, that someone's taking into consideration that the road network, at least in the portion that the city has, is in pretty rough shape right there.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah, it's, of course, you got Baker Road here. Our plans for this area, and it's honestly, it's down the ways a little bit, but it's actually a connection back over 24, back to Florence Road, back through the Sazerac property. But, that's a new interchange at, with 24 and whatever we call the road over to Sazerac there, and it's just, that's a long-term deal.
Isn't Veterans also going to hopefully
It will, yes, it will. It absolutely, it will connect. We've right in here is where the path is, but even that's difficult. We actually worked with Mr. Beatty as far as the location of it, just trying to get something that was agreeable, because it's going through a lot of his property.
I'm not in opposition at all with the school site, but we just need to make that consideration with whatever's being considered on that network out there, because that intersection at Blackman, Burnt Knob, Manson Pike is in pretty rough shape out there.
Sure, absolutely. I'll start working with Mr. Huddleston to see what we can get on the books out there.
Okay.
Chris, do we have any update on Joe B. Jackson's interchange signalization?
I think, Jim, you got something on that?
The signalization of the interchange at Joe B. Jackson is scheduled to come in with Buc-ee's, because they're going to be ahead of TDOT's schedule.
Okay.
So that will be coming in with the Buc-ee's development.
Okay.
Along with some improvements to the ramps and the interchange itself.
Jim, what about lighting on both of those? What about lighting at Veterans Parkway and Joe B. Jackson?
Lighting at Veterans Parkway was let this past September. It's scheduled to be completed September of next year. And that will also be installing signalizing the interstate ramp. So you'll get signalization, interstate lighting. It's currently under contract for Veterans and 840. Joby Jackson, I believe that the schedule, I had it on my list, I believe the schedule for the lighting is going to be in 2024.
We just approved the Elam Road plans and for Bucky's, and I want to say that we're trying to get that work done pretty close together. So like Jim said, they're a little bit ahead of TDOT on the ramp improvements.
You all did a fantastic job. Fantastic, very informative. And I was sitting here doing some calculation. Looks like 2032, all of these projects will be done. We won't even recognize Murfreesboro. You know, you did a fabulous job. Thank you.
Appreciate that. And I appreciate, I've said it over and over again, but I appreciate we're one of the biggest road builders in the state, and that has nothing to do other than the council support. A lot of communities don't. I worked for the city of Nashville for a few years, and we'd still be working on our first project if it was if we was them. So we appreciate very much the council support in all of these.
It's good letting the public know, because they are thinking that we own all the roads, and they don't realize some of these are state roads. So it's good we are keeping the public informed.
I agree. Great partner of ours as well.
I like in this too that y'all have learned from the contractors that you spend time with that we have start dates, but we don't have completion dates.
We have learned from past mistakes, for sure.
Jim and Chris, two questions. I guess one, just coming off 840, it doesn't matter which direction I'm coming, but coming off 840 to get on 24, headed to Chattanooga, always throws me off. But right there around where you get off at Medical Center Parkway, in the evenings, it just backs up horrifically. To the point that it's almost dangerous. Well, not almost, it is dangerous trying to get on the interstate. It's almost backing up now to the ramp with all the cars on the side of the road just trying to get on Medical Center. Is there any way to fix that or improve that in the near future? Because it is a...
There's actually a contract with TDOT, or TDOT has a contract out to improve those ramps. We did not include all of those ramp improvements with this particular presentation, but matter of fact, I believe you guys signed off on us maintaining the signalization for that not too long ago for that particular project. But it is moving forward. Last I heard, it's in the right-of-way phase. They are going to have to buy some additional right-of-way, but they will be improving the ramps on each approach, as well as some of the signalization configuration at the interchange itself.
It's just bad it's a matter of time for there's a 10-car pileup, honestly, out there. I don't want to say that's going to happen, but it's probably going to happen. And I know you guys are aware of it.
Well, TDOT currently has 3 ramp improvement projects in Murfreesboro through the Improve Act that they're currently working on, and they're all kind of running parallel with one another.
Okay. One more for you, adaptive signal technology. So that's one of my hot buttons. So Rutherford Boulevard, are there any other places within the city that we can embrace that technology?
Well, we are looking at that. What Boulevard is so intriguing, it's because of there's no consistency in the volume of traffic out there, specifically being around the campus. And when you have, traffic going just all over the place, then adaptive can figure that out and make changes. Typically along major corridors like Memorial and Old Fort Parkway, there's a lot more consistency within that develop, or within those peaks. And through some of the signal performance measures that we will be able to get out of our current system should help us develop better, more precise time of day plans, which we can go into timing plans prior to that peak pushing out. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. So it's not the only one we're going to do.
We're going to look at other options or other locations that we could leverage that technology, but they've got to be two specific projects and not all projects, I guess is what I'm saying.
Okay.
That's benefit out of the actual system itself.
Just to add to what Jim said, we really think the third lane's going to help us on the Medical Center Parkway interchange as well, because it, especially that section through there is just, it's bumper to bumper, which is one of the reasons why we've been so protective of that Asbury Lane intersection there. We think anything we do there is going to affect the interchange, so we're going to try to push it further away.
All right, thank y'all.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move to the Murfreesboro 2035 Chapter 4 and Future Land Use Map update.
Good morning, Mayor McFarland and council members. Thank you for the opportunity to stand before you to share the revisions to the future land use map and text. If I could, for just 5 minutes, share with you what has taken place up to this point, then allow Kevin Gunther to come forward and present the proposed changes to the future land use map. Also, the ask today is for council to give us the opportunity or approval to move forward to Planning Commission for approval or receive direction from the council and the ability to sit down and talk about the plan more in depth if needed. As you know, we presented the first update back in early spring to this body and the Planning Commission in its joint workshop. At the end of the meeting, it was suggested that we meet back with the development community to discuss some other areas of the plan, the revised plan, which we did. It was a good meeting. We met with several stakeholders from the development community to talk about specific areas as related to the land use, opportunities. With the stakeholders of the development community, the meeting generated further questions, which was put in writing and submitted to the planning department by a representative of the stakeholder group. We believe the meeting allowed us to reach a good point in our discussion. 2 weeks ago, we met with the Planning Commission on our workshop to discuss the future land use map changes. We had the ability to lay the map out in 4 areas, work through great questions and suggestions. It was a very productive meeting. Now we're here to present to you. Before I take my seat, I want to share a couple of things we all are aware of. Lots are a lot smaller. Good land to develop has gone. Utilities are requesting larger easements, density versus yield. The need for density to make the numbers work is what we're hearing in the proposed developments. And then the elephant in the room, market versus vision. How does market and vision lay out? We hear that the developers say that market says townhomes are needed now, and then we hear, how does Murfreesboro look 10, 20, 15 years from now? With that said, we believe that what we're presenting to you today helps us be able to manage those opportunities. Important note to know is in 2035, there's a 2035 comprehensive plan in July of 27 that was adopted in July of 27. It was a 20-year vision. There's 12 years left on that vision. Plan elements include major functions of Murfreesboro land use, one of the major functions as defined in Chapter 4. So we're only here to ask for revisions to Chapter 4, not the entire 2035 comprehensive plan. We believe the new updates that we're presenting to you will allow us the opportunity to provide, that'd probably help, wouldn't it? We'll provide a tool for the city leaders to inform land use and development decisions. We believe the revisions we're providing for you today will ensure efficient, consistent use of land to accommodate growth and development. It will allow us to better capture the vision of needs of the city. It will allow us to protect adequate supply of land for the diversity and land uses and quality of life. And lastly, it allows us to efficiently coordinate land use and infrastructure needs. What it's not, what the future land use map is not, it's not a wholesale change to 2035 comprehensive plan. It's not a zoning map. The future land use map doesn't have any ordinances or subdivision regulations tied to it. It's not rigid, fixed, or in stone, but it is not meant to be changed without study or approval. Key points for the update that we kept in front of us as we were updating it was we wanted to make sure it functioned as an accurate tool for establishing infrastructure. We wanted to make sure it would be able to evaluate potential growth, development, and annexation. We wanted to make sure we were able to shape policy and growth for the city of Murfreesboro with the future land use map. We also wanted to make sure it was a collaborative effort by all departments in the city of Murfreesboro. Fire, we sat down with fire, we sat down with water resources, sat down with the police department and schools. We wanted to make sure that it was collaborative and working together so that everybody could have a say-so in what it did. And lastly, to provide consistent messaging related to the land use development. One of the things we saw is that there are opportunities when the developments come in to be able to consistently give the message of what we are wanting the city of Murfreesboro to look like. Kevin Gunther will come forward and talk about the elements of the future land use map that we're proposing as changes before you. I'm available for any questions up until that point to be able to share.
Pleasure to be here today, Mayor, council members, and I want to thank city staff and leadership and also all the stakeholders that have been involved in this process as well. This has been something we've been working on for a while, and I believe it's important, and I think you all understand that it's important. As Mr. McKnight had mentioned, this is a tool for you to really kind of shape together vision and policy and implementation, and therefore we wanted to take it very seriously and make sure we took the time to craft it well. I think what we present to you has done that. What I'm going to target in this discussion today is really the main changes and what has happened. There are plenty of other things we can touch on if we need to, but these are the major points that are significant changes with the new elements of the plan. And one of those things is economic target centers. You'll see on the map there are orange circles. There's 5 areas that have been identified as key elements for economic development. We received a lot of input from Jim Colson on this, as well as Randall Gross, and looked at places in the city where we feel you should designate as key economic places of growth. And as you understand, as the city grows, there needs to be a balance. There needs to be a way that your infrastructure, that your quality of life is fueled by new economic development. And we believe that these areas that have been highlighted are very key areas for that to happen. Those areas include Veterans Parkway in 840, Cherry Lane in 840, Medical Center Gateway District, the downtown area, the Hoover site, on Middle Tennessee Boulevard, and also Joe B. Jackson on I-24. Another major change that has been added to the map is what we call the future study area. I want to make sure that it's understood this is not saying development can't occur in this light green area, but what we're saying is that we are not painting it, if you will, with a specific land use at this time, because we believe that if there is a annexation, zoning, or change to these areas, it should be considered with a lot of study. And this is coinciding with what we're going to call the infill service line. And you'll see that any area in light green is suggested to be something that wouldn't normally have high expectation for development in the next 12 years. And if there is a proposed development in that area, it should be very carefully studied before any type of land use is applied to it. This is another key tool that I think is very important for you as city leaders. We call it the service infill line. And the intent to this is really a change in philosophy, if you will, for, I think, what the city was looking at 10, 15 years ago. There was an old philosophy that kind of said, keep expanding out, keep following your corridors out, extend, if you will, the growth of the city out. And then development will come in, provide the infrastructure and the tax base to support that. And I think we are, as a city, now at a place that is different than that. And that is, let's start to think about how to focus growth in a certain area. Let's do it in a smart, sustainable manner. And let's promote a density and mixture of uses within that service infill line that is going to be key to supporting some of the types of things that were just discussed even here today. I thought it was great that there was this discussion about infrastructure and roads and how the city is going to need to continue to invest in those things and where they make sense. And as Greg had pointed out, not only did we look at roads when we looked at this line, we looked at where's the water and sewer districts, where are the emergency services being provided, where are the schools growing. So it was a very good discussion with all the city departments, and there was a lot of excitement about establishing this line to help the city focus in on a very smart type of growth. A new land use category that's been added is called auto urban. And this is the district that we are saying, at least within the future land use map, would support some of your higher density residentials. One of those would include townhomes, and we know that's been a lot of discussion, as Greg had alluded to earlier. And so what we wanted to do is include some very specific language that if an area was included in auto urban, it would allow for townhomes, but it would do it with a certain design intent. Here again, this isn't a zoning ordinance that dictates exactly what has to happen, but we wanted to give you some parameters of how you would evaluate whether the future zoning or development of a parcel would be suited for townhomes. So what we've done is highlighted that there should be a mixture of both townhomes and single-family or other types of residential on a site. And that would include 10-acre sites that have at least a certain acreage that would support 20% by acreage townhomes, and 40% by acreage could go to, 40% unit count could go to townhomes. What that's basically saying is, yes, allow for townhomes to happen in new areas, allow for that to be in the mix, but let's put a cap on that, suggesting that only a certain percentage would be townhomes. And once again, that's either 20% by acreage or 40% by units. One of the things that we had conversation with when it came to stakeholders and developers was where there are examples of where this is happening. Where could there be something that we point to that we think is working? So we looked at some things, and we thought Puckett Station was a pretty good example of that. It currently stands at 20% townhomes, 46% by units. And then also River Landing was a good example of where this is working pretty well. A little bit higher percentage on townhomes, about 40%, and 60% units. Another new land use category, if you will, is mixed form housing. This is mostly in the downtown area. And this really focuses on how does additional housing fit with the surrounding context. So we want to allow for single-family detached, single-family attached, up to 4-unit buildings. The key is having it work within a certain context of what's around it, providing a higher level architectural details in the discussion of the approval of projects, and then also looking at possible transitions between future projects and existing projects. Important design discussions should include things like building facade, building materials, how the street is integrated into the project, and how it's fitting with existing homes or businesses that surround it. Employment generating is a new category. There was also a lot of discussion about this and its importance. And this kind of ties with those orange circles that I was describing as far as economic centers and places of employment. This land use is really tying into the idea that jobs and businesses should be the forefront of development that occurs in these areas. So yes, residential uses can come in, mixed uses can come in, but we're looking for vertical use. We're looking for density that includes job creation. That's the key to this district. And that even the job creation would come before you would have, say, any kind of multifamily or high-density residential. Business innovation is a new district. This is similar in that it's looking at where does industry and where do jobs come in, but it's really more about business and industry than it is residential. This would not include a residential mix. We're looking for areas that have good opportunities for vocational training, high-end manufacturing, high-tech industry. And this is all come together, what we present to you now is the revised future land use map that demonstrates these land use categories. I know we've spent a lot of time, as I said, working with staff and key stakeholders, community leaders, at looking at very carefully at all these areas before they were kind of mapped out. The last thing I'll touch on is something Greg had mentioned. He said this is an important tool. It's a tool that we want you to see as flexible, as guiding, but we also want you to think about not automatically changing the future land use map for every kind of application that comes in. And these are reasons we've given you in our study that highlight what types of things would constitute good reasons for change. So we want there to be flex. We want you to be able to craft this as you go forward. But we want you to think about these reasons as being pretty good reasons as to why you would flex. Sometimes collectors and arterial streets, there's a blurring, if you will, between land uses along those corridors. That might be one reason. Another reason might be consolidation of land, and you're looking at something that is including more than just individual land parcels as the map was shaped out. We had to start with something. We started with land parcel boundaries, and we painted each of those areas, if you will, based on that. But as land consolidation changes, as boundaries within land properties change, it could be very good reason to talk about flexing or changing some of those land use patterns. This is a flat map. We try to look at geography. We try to look at environmental constraints. But we know that as you look at individual sites, more may come to light as it relates to geographical environmental constraints. So that might be a reason to flex. There might be changes as the city grows, and we know there will be changes as the city grows. So, as patterns change, those are also something to consider. So I'm just going to summarize this in saying that we hope this tool is really something the city can utilize for a lot of future growth considerations. We'd like to put before you today, as Greg had mentioned, a couple directions that you can go, either to say, yes, we think this is ready to go back to Planning Commission for consideration, adoption, or we'd like to dive into a more detailed study and look at the maps a little bit more closely. We're seeking to get some type of Planning Commission adoption January or February. We'd like to look for resolution of support from the council sometime in February or later. But as I said, we're here to serve you and make sure that you've got the information you have at hand to make decisions. So happy to answer any questions you have.
I've got a question for Greg.
I got a few too, Sean.
During the workshop for Planning Commission, we had talked about a couple things about more closely defining what a multi-use project was, so it wasn't basically just a glorified apartment complex with one piece of commercial in it, and now it's mixed use. And also in the income generating circles, how much of that income generating has to go in before mixed use is allowed. That way you don't have a situation. If you go back to medical center, I don't think anybody that was sitting up here when medical center was approved could ever imagine that many apartments sitting on medical center. So kind of to correct that for future, how much income generating goes in before you allow an apartment, whether it's just one unit or multiple units.
Yeah. Sean, Jim Colson, in his report that he did, the economic report, he actually had those percentages in his report. We looked at it as a team and didn't know if we wanted to box that in by putting numbers on it and not allowing the creativity when they come in for a plan development or a master plan. We're open to look at it, but really that was our thinking on not putting percentages in that economic generating area.
I personally, I'm just one of 7. I personally would like numbers in there. That way you don't have a run of apartments going into an income generating area without a substantial income generating property there first.
We can look at it there. They already provided, he had a number around 30%. So he has provided that information for us.
Just I'm the new guy still, so I'll ask this. Jim Colson and Randall Gross, who were they?
Jim Colson was an economic development consultant at the city that we hired to come in and look at different opportunities for economic development. Where are those areas, which is shown on the future land use map in the orange circles, Austin, and he identified those areas due to location to the infrastructure, location to interstates, and then the land mass around them, and thought that those would be good areas for us to focus in on economic development. Downtown was one of those areas.
Okay.
So he did an extensive study on Murfreesboro and what we could look for economic development. Randy Gross works for,
Randall Gross is an economic development consultant. He is an economist, and he's worked quite a bit with the city in the past looking at areas like the downtown area. So he's very familiar with what some of the existing trends and market conditions have been in the city, and helped us kind of establish if the city were to continue kind of on its current trends, what would that look like? And he made some suggestions as it related to those job growth areas as well.
They worked with other cities and municipalities, I assume, on
Yes, sir.
similar
Both of
projects?
those consultants have done work all over the country, and in Randall's case, I know all over the world. So they're very well versed in city growth.
So a couple more questions. The mixed form for downtown, when it says live, work, are we talking about condominiums with, say, a Starbucks and a pizza shop and a tennis shoe shop below it? What is live, work exactly?
So I think the intent there is to allow for some business opportunities within that fabric of more of a kind of traditional neighborhood. I think those would have to be evaluated very carefully, case by case. I don't know that we have a set pattern that says a certain number of square feet, and I don't know, Craig, if you want to add to that, but I think it's really more about if people are trying to start a business in a home environment, it gives some flexibility to that.
Also, we identified those mixed form housing areas off of Howland, Evergreen, those areas that would allow us to have the everything close in walking proximity with the closer streets and those types of opportunities.
You'll see it, the term used in development sometimes with residential attached to office, so that you're living right with your office, and that was a trend probably 7 or 8 years ago where you'd see some of that. It was mixed success and market adoption to do that, because there's very limited people that want to do that and they can do that. So you'll see it sometimes used in that context. I'm not sure that they were talking about actual development of those type of units here. This is more of a mixed with separate developments, but just close enough where you can live, work in your same environment without having to drive.
And Councilman Maxwell, that actually came out of our North Howland study that we conducted that's been on with the city for a while, since 2017 as well. That was one of the recommendations they had for those areas.
Well, I think it's great if you can live and walk half a mile to go to a restaurant, shop, what have you. When I saw live work units, I said, are we talking about apartments? Are we talking about condominiums? That's kind of what I was asking. The other question was around the business innovation ones, and you got two of those. Is there a buffer in there? Because that one that's identified on the Hoover property, you've got Broad Street running down, and you've got all those residential homes in Kensington and all those homes right across the street. So is there a buffer to where to me, it looked like the fork of the river was kind of the end point for that BI, and the rest of that would be single-family home or RS-15 or whatever it's zoned. Can you pull that back up? BI.
There.
Yeah.
I think the intent is to identify the land use, the highest and best use for those areas. And then at that point, our normal ordinances and subdivision regulations, those things would actually determine what the buffers would be for those developments. And we're asking that those be master planned in a planned development, and we will work through those buffers and how they actually lay out in the development.
Okay.
So it's not, and I think Kevin talked about it, it's not just this is where it has to be, but we would work on what that looks like in the particular areas. The circles, the diameter just identifies land within that area, and then everything else would be master planned.
Yeah, and there's, for example, there's 89 acres there on that area around, on the northern side of that off of Rutherford, that Britt Murphy would say, I guess they're looking at, they've got a contract, 'cause it's got railhead, so that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm concerned more about the buffers in some of those areas because you've got residential right there by it.
We have met with Mr. Murphy about that area, talked about those same opportunities and some of the same restrictions in that area as we look for development in that area.
Okay. I mean, personally, I'd like a little more time to marinate on it. I mean, y'all have done a lot of work on it. It looks well thought out, but I just need time to really look at it and read it. And
as we're sort of digesting, what's the next, it's still got to go to Planning Commission. Planning Commission would have to hold public hearings on it, and then it still has to come to the council. We would have to hold public hearings on it. I mean, what's the timeline?
Yeah, I think the timeline we shared was February would be back to you guys for affirmation. But with that, we're open. We did a session with the Planning Commission where we actually did a public meeting, had the maps laid out in 4 areas, and actually just dove into the map and walked through it extensively for about 2 hours for them to become more familiar with it and comfortable with what's being presented. We're open, and that's part of the ask for the day was either move forward or have a special meeting to be able to have that opportunity to do it. The important part about it is we know the current one we have. We don't have very much confidence in it, and we don't use it that much. But we believe the only way we're able to move forward and keep the vision of what you guys are asking us to do consistently is by having this tool. So we're open to do whatever that is.
When we did the 2035 plan 10 years ago, the land use plan was by far the weakest part of that study, and fortunately it was the least input that as a council and planning commission we had very little input on that land use plan. So I like the way that we've gone through and really talked about this. The thing that concerns me personally, I would like to have that same meeting that you're going through those areas and looking at the land like what you're talking about for planning commission. But I'm not sure that we don't need to do that at some point with a joint meeting with the planning commission. The reason I say that, we've had really 2 meetings out of the last 4 or 5 that we've gone a different direction with the planning commission on zonings. And that's healthy for that to be able to happen. But we do need to have some dialogue with the planning commission as a council to talk about those areas and what the council sees as the vision for those areas. And then that discussion with the planning commission, we need to set what, hey, for example, if you bring forward a dense subdivision or a dense rezoning on an existing piece of property where it's completely surrounded by RS-15, then the planning commission needs to know that that probably has a high likely of not passing through the council. And right now, I'm not sure that we have that understanding, especially after the rezoning request the other night.
Right, yeah.
But we did that 3 or 4 years ago. We had a joint meeting with the planning commission, and I think that probably would be a good idea in conjunction with the land use to have that discussion.
Yeah, I agree. It also sets the vision of what we want Murfreesboro to look like in the future, not just everybody going in different directions.
Really what you're asking here, we hear this from the planning commission, having served on the planning commission, that we take project by project, right? That's, the planning commission they discuss and they consider a project that's before them. And really what you're going to be doing with this land use plan now is not necessarily the projects before you, it's how does that fit within the plan of the existing area.
That's correct.
And that's a change for the planning commission as opposed to just looking at, is this a good development that we have before us?
And then how we present it to the planning commission is going to be, it fits, the future land use map is compatible, so you're exactly right, it'll be a change in how we look at the area. Or if not, we're where we are now, where we take a project and change what that looks like project at a time, so.
It's going to be a significant change for the development community from the council standpoint, but we really are going to have to relay back to the development community because we have not ever had a land use map that everyone takes and says, this land use map has gone through planning commission, it's gone through the council, and this land use map, in all intent purposes, this is a Bible. And we're not going to deviate from what we have considered. Because what's happened, especially over the last 10 years, our land use map not being very good at all, it's like, well, that's just sort of that's a guide. We can deviate from that. I mean, we did it with the Costco out on Highway 99. That was not compatible to the land use plan that we had. So we really need to get this right. I would recommend we do that with the planning commission as opposed to trying to just say, let the planning commission consider it, and we'll consider what the planning commission brings.
Set that up. And just over the last year, we matched up what we've done. Over the last year, the developments that have been approved, and there were only 2 that would have been outside of what we're proposing, just because we don't use this as it's been adopted, but we do use it to try to be consistent in our message from the planning department. So it's been falling pretty good. So.
And I don't mean this probably the way it's going to come out, so our political filter is gone. That same conversation that we have as a council, the planning commission needs to hear that loud and clear because the planning commission is appointed, they're not elected. And if there are planning commissioners that, I don't think there are any, but if there are planning commissioners that don't agree with the direction that the council wants to go, it's great to have that healthy dialogue. But what is also not healthy to the development community is to have a project that goes all the way through planning commission and then it gets to council and then it gets kicked out. So we need to make sure that everybody's on the same page. And there may be planning commission members who say, look, I want to see more townhomes and I don't want to see percentages. And then if the council says, look, we want to see those percentages and we don't want to see as many dense developments, for example, in what we saw the other night, if someone brought through townhomes there and that passed planning commission, then we need to have the discussion with the planning commission. Is that what the council wants to see?
Absolutely. So we can set that up because it helps the staff as well, Mayor, that we're able to relay what we believe, not what we believe we heard as a vision for Murfreesboro, but what has been set forth by Planning Commission and Council. So we welcome it.
We can look at doing that in January. January workshop comes up pretty quick after the first of the year. So maybe towards the end of January, the 18th to the 25th, somewhere around that time. Those are Wednesdays. But you catch some afternoon, do a joint meeting around the second and third week of, actually it'd be the third or fourth week of January might be a good time frame.
Maybe if you found a Wednesday that you don't think that we'll be meeting that Thursday.
Yeah, that's maybe that, if we did it on the 25th, probably would meet on the 26th. So we could do it on Wednesday, the 25th. We'll check with calendars because Austin's gets a little tight, I know.
No, that's fine. I can always adjust.
Far enough out. Get you a new chair.
Chairs or something else. It's going to sit like Madeline now, so.
We'll look at that time frame, see if we can put together a joint meeting.
Numbers aren't always telling to when you're trying to vision, but is it easy to, the percentages of each of the categories within this land use study? I mean, is there is that a hard thing to do, or?
We haven't done that. We haven't looked at the map that way. Part of where that did come into play, Councilmember Shacklet, is when Randall was looking at current trends, and we were kind of saying, here's where different types of land uses are happening, where they're growing, and kind of doing the squint test, if that projects over this map. We thought it was important to look at it more in the context of what is there now, how does the city services and the vision shape things, as opposed to raw percentages of land use. So we tried to kind of avoid that, categorizing things that way, if that makes sense.
It does, because I think ultimately the decision is not a numbers necessarily, it's each project as you approach it, but I'm just wondering, when we start talking about trends, if our vision is, if we see something when percentages in this forecast, normally we've done land use studies of a particular area is where we've normally done. We've taken a part of the town, and I think this is amazing. Y'all need to be complimented for the work that you put into this, because I know it's been a long process. But it just came to, the thought to be able to kind of see, is there some trend here that we're heavily loaded in a particular category?
So I can say that as far as trends go, that was one thing that was highlighted by both Randall and Jim, economic development input we got, is that your current trends are high-density residential.
Mm-hmm.
That's where, if you continue adding to that, that is a trend that will continue if you don't reshape that vision. And the need for more job-created, economically based office and commercial was something that we were trying to weight more of. And so those were pretty clear messages we got when you just look at the raw numbers and see what was happening, is you can continue to let this happen if that's your vision and you're okay with that, or you can start to shape it and shift those trends a little bit.
Did we do that, you think, as far as?
I think what you have in front of you is certainly a vision that, yes, captures those two thoughts as part of.
Because the circles are the economic development things.
Yes, sir.
Basically, that you're identifying centers where you're planning for job development.
I think those are well targeted for, a lot of economic growth and for trying to generate that mixed use that would have jobs with it. Not to say that you couldn't do that anywhere in the city.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I also think that you pointed out something it's something to consider, is that this is one overall map for the whole city. I think the city has done a good job at targeting some specific areas in the past for a little more focus, and having a land use study that, that could be something in the future as well that you might want to consider, and don't want to preempt Mr. McKnight's thoughts on that, but I think that is something traditionally a city your size would continue to look at.
Well, to me, the strongest tool to this is, it's great for us, but we give our staff a clear understanding, a picture for what our expectations are, and I hope we can, The whole thing about planning was giving people reasonable expectations as to what's going to happen. And the development community, existing property owners, everybody understands what reasonable expectations mean. And so people don't do significant investment in a development plan. The staff doesn't spend their time, trying to put a square peg in a round hole, or a round hole in a square peg, whatever that analogy is, and trying to make it fit. And then, like you say, Mayor, it gets to the point to us and we have to say, this doesn't fit. So, I think the tool this is for our staff is as important as anything we're doing.
All right. One more thing to add. I'm kind of like Shane. If it's a critical document that creates alignment between planning and the council. One thing I would like to know whenever we have this conversation and look at it, whether it's January 25th or the middle of February, is what are those percentages? If this is the way it's going to be, and we're looking at 2035, what is going to be our percentage of single-family homes, townhomes, apartments, and so forth? In other words, to Sean's point, what do we want Murfreesboro to look like? Where are we going? What is that really going to look like in 2035 once we tweak these changes?
And we can
that's what I would want to know.
We don't mind looking at that and working with Gerald Lee. Gerald Lee in GIS he's pulled together numbers of kind of where we are currently to start looking at it. We don't know with what we were proposing as a land use map that we would be able to dictate what type of developments would come in to be able to share those types of percentages of where we think we would be because of the map being designed just to identify the highest and best use for the area.
Hypothetically, we could say if it's this percentage, kind of like in one of those slides where it said, if it's townhomes and a percentage is this, we could have some idea, I would hope.
Look at that.
Yeah.
If we know what our target is in 2035, if our target's 25% multifamily by 2035 and we're approving 50% multifamily year to year, we're not ever going to hit that target.
We're not ever going to hit it.
Right. So we got to figure out how to limit those numbers in a downward slope.
Yep.
Gerald Lee, GIS, see if he can help identify an opportunity and a way to do that.
Greg, what did the schools say as a stakeholder? I'm just curious.
When we met with the schools, and as a matter of fact, Mr. Blomley gives a monthly report on building permits and those things. What the schools actually identified was an area that they didn't have on their radar for growth was the Black Fox area. Okay. And when we shared with them that farmhouse, that large development down John Bragg Highway, the other developments off of Village Road, they didn't have that on their radar and realized that they probably need to actually put that on their growth plan. Okay. And so what they have been able to do is look at what is happening in areas that they didn't really, they think west, but now we are able to, through the future land use map and other developments coming through, they were able to start looking at it a little bit wider and understand that other areas are going to be impacted.
Okay.
But right now, the future land use map and the service infill line lines up with where they are as it relates to schools being built. It lined up with where the fire department was going to build fire departments, their stations, as well as where Chief Bowen was going to be able to manage his protection of the city as well.
Okay.
Thank y'all for your hard work on this. This hopefully will give us a lot more guidance moving forward that we haven't had. So.
Acknowledge Mr. Blomley, Ms. Green, and Ms. Rush, and their work with the team as well. So they did the heavy lifting as the brainiacs of the group. Yeah. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll move to item 10, Development Impact Fee Study. Mr. Tindall.
We've had the opportunity to look at development impact fees a couple of times, and now's a good time to talk about it because we had a couple of forward-looking presentations. This development impact fees, as you know, has to do with growth and financing some aspects of the city's expenses that are related to growth. And I know that when we talked about it earlier this year, Jamie and Austin weren't with us, so I included the report, give them a chance to take a look at it. Today is just a discussion, not asking for anything out of council other than consideration and direction on how to move forward. But what we did is to look at our closest neighbor that's doing any development and see what the market's absorbed. And so we looked at Smyrna's development impact fees. Most jurisdictions, I don't have the statistics with me, most jurisdictions do have development impact fees. Most places that developers are active in, they understand what development impact fees are, and they pay them, and they integrate them into their prices, and they move forward. We haven't historically had that here, so it's new. So you'll hear from the development and the real estate community that you're just trying to hurt us or add more cost or anything else. But you have to realize when they do new development, everybody else finances a part of what happens from that development. And so that's what a development impact fee is intended to cover. It has to relate to the costs, and so we've gone through the study, which is what you've seen and what I shared with everybody else, the study that was done. We hired a consultant that does it all over the country and does the math and the analysis and comes up with what fees are. When we looked at Smyrna's, we looked at the maximum fee that they charge on the various aspects of development, and then the maximum that came out of our study. Generally, Smyrna's lower than what our max is. There was a couple areas where we had to drop back to what our analysis showed as the max that we could justify for our infrastructure growth. I handed out earlier some representative revenue that would be created by this type of fee. Now, this is an estimate based on the growth that's happened from December of 21 through December of 22, and it's a very rough estimate. It just kind of gives you some idea of the magnitude of what the fee would be able to generate. It's not intended to indicate an actual number because that's going to vary by year, and the assessments, this is done off the maximum fee. The assessments may be lower on individual development, so it's not intended to be actual projection of revenue that's coming in. But you can see it does contribute a significant amount, particularly with respect to public safety. That's a very good assistance that it would provide to public safety as we try and continue to provide high level of public safety. Parks always has infrastructure costs that they could incur. Those are projects that generally get deferred in a tight market, and if we have fees that were set aside just for those would be able to be taken care of. And of course, we talked a lot about roadways and the amount of money that it contributes to roadways from the standpoint of the cost of a roadway isn't substantial, but it is something that would be helpful in developing roadways or paying towards TDOT on some of the areas that is a state road. And if we contribute a portion to it, it does help us in the priority in getting the state to address whatever situations happen on that roadway. So it's important money, and obviously I think everybody understands, given the growth that we've gone through and the difficulties it creates, that it would be helpful. So happy to answer any questions about what we've suggested, what we found in our comparisons, or about the report itself. We can pull up staff that can answer those questions. If the council is amenable to this, we'll prepare an ordinance. Come back to council. It certainly can be more discussion then if it's needed. And of course, timing may be when that might come back. Could be a part of the direction that we get out today. Happy to answer any questions or take any suggestions.
Craig, I know I already touched on it briefly, but the study has very different numbers than the sheet you just handed us.
Right.
I had just seen this.
Yeah.
So that makes me feel a little better. But the city's proposing this is the actual maximum impact fee, not the $10,000 that the study shows on the last
Right.
page, right? Okay. And then I know that for single family homes, even detached and townhomes here, they have it per unit, but everything else is per square foot. And my question earlier was whether or not we are charging this at development or at the building permit, which is a big question for me, so something I wanted the council to talk about. And then I'll go on my rant about impact fees later.
Right, and there's lots of different versions, and different cities do different assessments even for single-family development by square footage. Could be an adjustment that's made in there, and so we can take a hard look at those. I was trying to find Smyrna's.
It's at the permit.
Yeah, but so it's at the permit. To answer your second question, it would be at the permit, so it would be assessed into the actual.
To the builder.
Yeah, which makes more sense. We talked earlier.
That's how most places do it, right? And if we're going to do it at the permit, though, could we potentially discuss on the single-family dwellings doing it per square foot as well, like most counties do?
Does Smyrna do it?
They do it per dwelling unit?
Yeah.
You could do it per square foot.
Yeah, other cities do it per square foot. And we could take a look at those and see, if there's a break. So if you're building less than 2,000 square foot, perhaps assessment, more than 2,000 square foot, perhaps an assessment. There's probably, from a logical standpoint, if you're thinking about the impact to roadways, if you're building a 2,000 square foot house or a 2,500 square foot house, the impact's probably the same. So, you have to kind of think what difference does, a few hundred square feet might make to.
Potentially. I mean, there is an economic argument there, but I would also say that, the average person per household that the study calculated, I think, was like 2.4.
Right.
And, future generations just aren't reproducing as quickly. And so I feel like I'm a big fan of the square foot calculation personally.
We can take a look at maybe a logical break point where we have maybe a less of a fee to go in there if that is something the council would like to see for a smaller unit or something along less bedrooms. Maybe we could go by bedrooms. We'll look at what's done in other places.
Knowing that impact fees are naturally going to be passed on to the consumer, I think it's only fair to let this be an impact to the middle class as much as possible. Let this be a little impact.
The county changed year before last. So the county, it used to be you paid $750 at the time your subdivision was platted. So the developer paid that, and then the builder paid $750 at time of permit, so it was split up. But then the county changed, and now it's $1 per square foot at time of permit.
Right.
So,
I think consistency with the county of some sort would be good. Builders.
Yeah, we would still probably want to max it at a rate that the market's absorbed, which is what Smyrna is, or at our nexus that we've developed through our analysis itself. So we could do a square foot, but then at a maximum.
You'd have to know, if you're doing it by square footage, you'd have to know what that sweet spot is of per square foot number. That way you're going to see a bell curve of the size house you get and what the maximum impact is per square foot to where that bell curve is.
the average home in Murfreesboro that sold last month was like $627,000. That was the average home. And that's not your average permit price, but if I had to guess, the average, if you were to average everything, and I'm sure building and codes, because you have to give your square footage, but I would be willing to bet that it's somewhere around 2,800 to 3,000 square feet would be our average home in Murfreesboro that's being built. If I had, if you figured on the low end, the townhomes at 1,600 to 1,800 square feet, on the high end, it's probably
2,400, 3,500?
It's probably 4,500 to 5,000 square feet on your upper end homes that are being built. So it's probably somewhere in that middle, 2,400.
The percentages just on the sheet, I see, looks like roads are about 60% of the allocation credit. Parks around 18.2, 18.3, and public safety 21.5, 21.6. Is that just based upon historical precedents, what other municipalities are doing, or what Smyrna did, or?
But truly be what Smyrna did, but it doesn't, it's pretty close to what we did in our analysis. So when you read the report, you'll see that they went in and dug into how much the cost was and how those costs are incurred, and so it just happens to work out that way. It wasn't an overview and then dividing them up. It was the result of a deep analysis on each one. Smyrna went through the same thing. They used a different contractor. They did the same thing. Everybody does about the same thing because of the court cases that came down years ago on this type of activity. So it's all pretty close, and that's just the way the numbers fell out as opposed to dividing up a whole number.
Can we adjust those as a council if we want to by a tenth here or a tenth there, if we feel like we want to give a little more to public safety or a little more to parks or a little more to roads?
Until we go to the maximum that was set in the report, and then we'd have to go back and redo the report. There may be a reason why the analysis and the study that we go through is too low because of costs changing or something. But we need to go back and probably hire the consultant and do the analysis. But as long as we're below that, then any adjustments forward is fine.
And these are lower, I would assume, than Franklin or Brentwood.
I believe that they are, yeah.
In Austin, Smyrna actually started out at 50%, and went to 75, and then a year ago, I think, they went up to 100%.
Wow.
So they didn't start out at what you see, they didn't start out at what you see on the chart. They incrementally went up over the years.
Okay.
Williamson County and Franklin have two separate impact fees. Williamson County has what's called a privilege tax, and I want to say it's $2 per square foot and that's based upon your house. And then there's a school tax that they passed 4 or 5 years ago that's, I mean, rough numbers, it's $11,000 under 3,000 square feet, and it's 11.5 or 12,000 over that, which most homes in Williamson County are greater than 3,000 square feet. I know when I would pull a permit in Williamson County, my total, including building permits and impact fees, it was somewhere around $35,000 is what it was per home. So it's extremely expensive.
Are they still calling it a school tax, or did they switch to facilities?
School, I think it's school and facilities tax.
The county's got in trouble for saying school tax.
Yeah. And I'll say this, I can't vote on this, but clearly I think we're going to get, anytime you talk about fee increase, we end up pushback. But, I'll say as a builder, we've gone a long time without having an impact fee in the city of Murfreesboro. I mean, every municipality that's around us has an impact fee. And no matter what we say, and we've seen this, growth doesn't pay for itself. I mean, the fair way, which it will never pass, is to have a transfer fee that every time a home is sold, then it's a small percentage and everyone who sells their home pays. That will never pass. It will never make it through the real estate lobby. So this is the only way to do it. And it seems fair. So,
Craig, did we ever get the school study back?
Yes, we do there is a fourth leg of this, and we did the nexus on this.
Was that in here?
It is not. We basically mimicked Smyrna's, which was public safety, and which is police fire, and parks and roads. We just mimicked what they did. But there is another leg of this, and that is schools.
I'd personally like to see the school study too, since Smyrna doesn't have a school system and we do, to look forward for our schools.
And I'm interested too,
I agree with that.
I see Smyrna and Mount Juliet and Laverne on the last page of the study, but are we planning on doing a phase-in of the maximum fee? Or, because I think someone just said that Smyrna did a phase-in, or did Williamson County?
They basically raised it 50%, 75 to 100, up to the maximum.
the council would set what the initial fee is, and it would be just like our solid waste fee or our stormwater fee. it's not like you would say, okay, look, we're going to get to the full amount in 3 years. The council would have to vote every year or every other year if they want to raise that fee or not.
Okay.
So it's not a, hey, they're recommending $10,000 and you got X years to get to 10,000. You set what the amount is, and then if council wants to raise that fee, you would have to do it just like you would any other fee.
And essentially, the markets absorb what other cities are charging. We're kind of, the odd thing is that we're not charging anything, so it's a little bit different. So if we went and just imposed the fee, it wouldn't be any different than if you were building just down the street. You'd still have that same fee, and the market for a house down the street for here might increase by that amount, but it's, that they're selling the houses up the street, they might as well sell them down the street.
If I remember right, this study was only good for, 5 years or 7 years from the point it was done?
You have to go back and redo it to make sure your data is updated.
All right, so even if we implemented this at the end of Q1 or something next year, we're probably having to redo this study by 24, correct?
The study was actually, the numbers are actually generated on a 5-year pro forma. You're right, by the time you would implement this, you probably have 1 year left. You probably need to revisit those because we've added Miles Road, we've added to this, so we'll probably raise that.
Yeah, so we would be looking at, instead of phasing in like you said Smyrna did, our numbers may totally drastically change when we redo our numbers for a new study from what they were prior.
Effective phase-in is what you're saying.
I would like to see whatever decision we make it based on information we've already received from consultants. I do not want to see us hire another consultant and be on the taxpayers' dime for that. I think we've had enough studies, and let's make our decision based on the studies that we've already had. And I would be interested in seeing, going off the subject a little bit, I would be interested in seeing maybe the first quarter of next year, how much money did we spend in 2022 on consultants? I'm not knocking them, but I think you can go overboard on consultants.
Well, you can, and we're careful on consultants. We try and hire consultants to do specific things that we wouldn't be doing regularly all the time, because you don't want to hire someone to be a full-time employee and then only have the job they need to do, a short-term job. That's where consultants come in. Impact fees are a little bit different than others because there's a history of court cases involved in it, and having an independent analysis that allows you to create what's called in legal terms a nexus between the fees and what you're charging and what you're charging for is important to substantiate the fees. So unfortunately for impact fees, you're almost stuck in doing it. Once they do it, and we've had it done once, it becomes less expensive to update it because they have a lot of the data. Now they're just updating the data to go forward. But you almost always see, if not always see, independent consultants do it for the impact fees because you need it from a legal standpoint. So we can get an assessment of consultants that come in, but we are careful. We don't, we hire expertise that we don't have and only need for a short period of time, and that occurs on a regular basis. And the larger you get, the more unusual things happen that you have to hire experts out that have the expertise to bring in-house and the additional resources. We try not to hire and have a lot of wasted resources. I don't want to say wasted, a lot of resources that are sidelined for a period of time. So we try and maximize the employment we have, and sometimes we just have to hire outside to do a job for a particular period of time because we don't have the excess capacity to do that. So those are the reasons to hire consultants.
We could probably find someone to tell us if we're hiring too many consultants,
A consultant?
Yeah.
Hire consultants that we can have to do that, yeah.
When I retire, I'm going into consulting because I've heard it's a good gig. So
I'm going into consulting of consultants, like she's talking about.
That's fine.
I think I'm good with the full blow, but I do want to see the school one, and I would be okay adding the school one in, I mean, if Smyrna is right down the road and the market is taking it in, Murfreesboro is going to absorb it also. But I do want to add the schools in also.
Okay.
I would second that. I think it's a good point to add in the schools. I had a question, but I think we know the answer to it. We haven't seen any slowdown in Smyrna. They've kept trucking right along. So I would anticipate we'll keep moving right along just as well.
Right.
I am not going to say this number is kosher with me, but I want to see the schools study as well.
I know Darren Gore wants to get in on it just from a sewage perspective, too.
They are,
Darren, stay back there.
the sewer, yeah, let's be clear, the sewer, they're getting their share.
Yeah, to a certain extent, there has been an impact fee here for quite some time, and it is in the utility side of it, and that makes some sense.
And that, a lot of people don't realize that, you know, the sewer already, there's a connection fee that goes across the board. So every person pays a connection fee, but then there is an impact fee in every basin that, you know, Overall Creek, there's going to be one now on Highway 99. There was one when the developer pulled out of Three Rivers that there was a impact fee, or what do we call it? Assessment. Yeah, sewer assessment fee. So we've been doing this for a long time.
I pay more for sewer on my water bill than I do for water itself.
Yeah, not to mention, there's even road networks that we have, like Sam on Maple Street, for example. There's areas that you pay into for future road upgrades. So, I mean, what we're talking about is not, it's not like we hadn't been doing it already, especially on the commercial side. So,
We, just like Shane said earlier, we have kicked this can down the road for the last couple of years. We should have done it when the market was great, but we didn't. But I also think that we need to look at, if this is Smyrna's number and everybody's good with Smyrna's numbers, let's bring this back to first quarter of next year, March, and let's implement this thing and get it rolling.
There's some additional numbers to go on it, so
Yeah.
we'll target kind of a March timeframe, but we'll get additional information to council, like with schools on it and other things to take a look at, kind of target that first quarter. Thank you. All right, good, thank you.
all right.
We're left with backward-looking information.
Any questions for Aaron on the October dashboard?
None for you?
All right. Any board and commission appointments? Any license?
We have a regular permit for an ownership and name change for a restaurant at 120 Eleanor Way, Suite A. Applicants met requirements for a permit and is recommended for approval. So moved.
Motion second, please call the roll.
Ms. Agerwater? Aye. Ms. Gels Harris? Aye. Mr. Maxwell?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
I'm sorry.
Question. I know I should know this, but I don't. A citizen asked me if they want to apply for appointment on a board, how do they apply? Is it an application? I know I should know this, but what's the
Online.
procedure? I told them to go online.
City website.
City website.
Look up.
Admin board application on the top, and it'll come right up.
Okay, does it have to be a specific board, or he said he just want to apply, have his name in when board
That's it.
appointments come open? It's not a particular board he wanted.
So when they apply, that will be emailed and it goes directly to Brenda and Kenya.
Okay.
And so they keep that in a list when, so, you know, anytime a board and commission comes up, there, believe it or not, we have trouble filling a lot of those commissions and boards. So they keep a running list, and so if there's anyone that y'all ever want, you know, to get involved, please just send them to me too, and I can help push those along.
And they could call Brenda Kenya if they...
I know I should know that, but I didn't. Thank you.
Any other business from staff? Any other business from council?
Everybody have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Absolutely. Thank y'all for everybody's hard work.